This episode is brought to you by Pure Astrology Reading Cards. For more information, check out the link in the show notes. Welcome to the Starzology Astrology Podcast. My name is Alison Price and I'm your host, and I'm here today with my good friend and co-host, Arwynne and Neil.
Hello, Alison. It's great to be here.
It's so nice to have you, and this is a very, very special episode.
It is.
We are at our 100th podcast episode.
Yay!
Who would have thought we'd have got this far?
Amazing. Confetti emojis, celebrating emoji.
Yes. Because when we started back in the day, it was last April, I got this brain spark to do a podcast. I got on it and had my first episode up, and then I thought, I'll get Arwynne on.
Yeah.
Because we used to do podcasts back in the day. We're talking over 10 years ago now.
Yeah.
Amazing. And of course, things have changed. Technology's moved on, and things are actually technologically easier than how things used to be back then.
True. Yeah.
And I think that's probably has something to do why we're not short of things to talk about. It's often, it's the technology that's the challenge.
Yeah.
Is the microphone on? What about the air conditioning? This and that. All of these things.
Totally.
And the actual logistics of getting the episode together is quite huge.
Yeah.
So below this podcast, I actually do have a link through to the blog post about the evolution of our podcast, and I do go in there about how it came about, and a bit more about our history and how we got together and whatnot, and also the fact that we live in the same building and we're on the we're conjoined, but we're actually parallel but not in conjunction. It's such an interesting thing.
It is,
and also
even to the point where you face the opposite direction of the building as I do.
Yeah, I'm facing east, you're facing west. But here we are. I mean, I've lived here now 12 years, and when we moved in, I thought, well, we'll be here 6 months and won't last here. And of course, here we still are. And this is the place I've lived in longest in my life, which is crazy because it's just an old apartment.
Yeah.
But
it's a nice apartment.
It's a nice apartment, but, one has these ideas about where you're going to live. But the point is that we've got quite a bit of history, and I'm also talking in the blog post particularly about what it takes to get this episode out. It's not, once it gets to your ears, dear listeners, there's been an awful lot of behind the scenes toing and froing and back and forth, planning, strategizing, typing, writing out, sorting out images, creating stuff, casting charts and what have you, searching, researching more, digging out our books and what have you. So it's hopefully
you've all rewarded us by actually listening and growing as an audience and sharing it with your friends. I mean, clearly I don't have as many hundreds of listeners as we have as friends. I mean, we have way more listeners than I know.
Our listenership is growing. We'll talk about that maybe a bit later on.
Yeah.
But and it is down to I think the reason we have kept going is because our listeners have said yes, they like what we're doing.
Yeah.
And we've had quite a lot of feedback on several of the episodes, some more than others. A lot of people seem to like the fact that we have different voices.
I like that.
It's quite clear who's talking, right?
Yeah. I mean, sometimes when you listen to a podcast, you just don't know who's talking. And that's a big problem sometimes.
They all
it can be annoying.
Same.
You're like, who is this? They just sound the same. Yeah, we don't
at
all.
And we've been told we're not shrill, so that's nice.
That is nice. I don't feel shrill.
No. Yeah. Not today. Anyway.
It's funny, though. We have a little pub downstairs, like just a little local, I call it it's like my den,
yes.
And we can say it's Relish. Shout out Relish. But what's really funny, though, to me, like I've passed out our little business cards to anyone who seems like remotely interested. Mm-hmm. And one day, like a month ago or so, I was chatting with someone and they were like, what do you do? I've known you for off and on for like a few months or years now. And what do you do? And I told them what I do for a living. And this server who comes, who works at Relish, she comes out and she goes, and she has a podcast.
Yes.
Which is amazing. He's like, oh, you have a podcast? And I'm like, here's the card. But it's so cute because I'd forgotten that I even gave her. I mean, who knows, how many of these have passed out. But sure enough, she listens to it all the time, which is charming and wonderful.
Amazing.
And,
we do get a lot of feedback. We get quite a few emails from people saying, about some episode or even with questions about things that really weren't quite clear. And as I say, some episodes are more popular because they're just more interesting, I suppose, in general. And even episodes that we put up over a year ago are still getting listens as new people are coming on board and they're saying, hey, let me go back to the beginning, and they're listening through.
I love that.
And which is great. And, if you find if you're listening today, then this is for you. Otherwise, you move on to the next thing, which is fine. Totally. We're not for everybody. I do know that. But we definitely, the fact that we've kept going this long and we've put in all of this energy and time jointly preparing so much to provide the best podcast we can.
Yeah.
We were talking about it a little earlier that sometimes the tech is what it is. We're doing our best here.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
it's exactly. Yeah.
And I'm enjoying it. We've got so much to talk about astrology. We're not running out of topics. That is for sure.
It's true. It's absolutely true.
Because I know other people who have put podcasts out and they call it pod fading after like 7 episodes. They just give up because they've run out of steam. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
But
one of the first conversations I ever had with you, and this is back in like 2013 or something, before we started our original podcast, when we first met. And I said, I remember complaining to you that I hadn't met any other astrologers in Vancouver, and I was bored with a lot of the podcasts because, and I know I've said this before, and you probably cringe every time I say this, and you were like, what's a podcast?
Yeah.
And then we started our own podcast.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, it's so funny how I would search for astrology podcasts back then, like, 12 years ago, and you'd find a bunch of them, but then you'd see like, oh, they've got 5 episodes, 10 episodes, and they stopped like 3 years ago. And why are they still showing up at the top of the list? What is going on here? And then you'd find certain ones where they're, clearly they've got sponsors, and maybe they're like a daily thing where it's like a 5-minute thing or whatever, and that's fine if that's what you want. But I was more interested in the in-depth, like I wanted to hear something that's like half an hour to an hour, and like an advanced, intermediate to advanced. Like I'm interested in
this. Is who we are, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I know what my day is like.
And if you go through to the blog post, I've actually written about our origin story, about how you said we should do a podcast, and I'm saying, what's a podcast? Because it was that clearly, there's a day when you don't know what a podcast is, then there's a day when you do,
and then there's a day when you have your own.
I know, and it took me another 10 years to even become a podcast listener, but so here we are, and we're doing our 100th episode, and you normally at our 25, 50, 75, and every 25 episodes we do a Q&A because we do get a lot of questions. A lot of questions we can answer in an episode like this, which we're going to. Yeah. And then some of the other questions, which are kind of big, meaty and juicy, we will create a full episode around that topic.
And we've done that a dozen times.
Yes.
We'll keep doing that for sure.
Yes. So today we're going to be answering a few of our listeners' questions, and hopefully we'll be answering yours.
Yeah. Amazing.
Okay, Arwynne, so do we have our first question?
We do, and this is one I wondered about back in the day when I first started. Well, actually, to be honest, not when I first started, but after I had been studying astrology for several years, all of a sudden it struck me, whoa, there is a southern hemisphere. Mind blown. JD says, I was born in the southern hemisphere, and most of the astrology books I learned from talk about these zodiac signs as they progress through the seasons of the northern hemisphere. So they would talk about like Virgo being, the harvest, and, Aries being the spring and all this stuff. How do I reconcile that in my head, being in the southern hemisphere? And that's a great question. I wondered that myself.
It really is, because, the problem here is that most of the books are written by northern hemisphere astrologers.
Yeah.
Which we are. But I did spend over half of my life in the southern hemisphere. Exactly. I do know this problem.
I thought you might.
Now, basically, because they are still talking about Virgo as the harvest, it still is the harvest, because we're starting the zodiac at Aries.
Yeah.
So even though you're not harvesting in the southern hemisphere, the principle, unfortunately, remains the same. So there's no actually easy answer for this, because by the time you get to it's to do with the phase from that beginning point.
Yeah.
That when you get round to that Virgo position, we're actually coming up to, in the northern hemisphere, clearly, the harvest, because, as we know, Leo's the big summer, Virgo's the early harvest, Libra's the middle harvest, and Scorpio's the last harvest. But southern hemispheres, really, when they're talking about that, I just want to say, well, ignore it, because it doesn't relate to the harvests in the southern hemispheres.
It's like Santa Claus, basically.
Well, this is it.
You have to just ignore the fact that he's wearing like a snowsuit and like has...
And it's snowing, and we're all in Dickinson villages.
And I'm sure they still have Christmas in Johannesburg.
Of course they do, but you're sweltering. You're at the pool. Right. It's an entirely different thing.
And they don't have Santa Claus in a bikini. He's
no, imagine that.
Yeah. I mean,
or chimneys, for that matter. So, but that's not the only problem with Southern Hemisphere calculations. You do have to realise that when you're actually calculating the chart, that if you're doing it manually, there's a major next step for Southern Hemisphere calculations. But because these days most people are just pulling something from Astro Gold or maybe Solar Fire or wherever you get your your charts from, that's working it out. But if you're doing it manually and if you're doing an exam, you will have to calculate Southern Hemisphere charts, which has an extra step.
All right. Just for the fun of it, for the historical value, what is that step?
Oh, it's the multiple steps are. What does it say? Add 12 hours and reverse the signs. You have to, I should have boned up on this before we got the question. What you have to do is you have to add 12 hours to the actual calculation I think it's when you get to the local mean time. On those calculations. And then you have to reverse it back. So this is tricky because back in the day when I started doing charts, there was no computers. You had to do it manually. And of course, because I was in Johannesburg, most of the charts were Southern Hemisphere that I was dealing with. And I'm following along. It said add 12 hours and reverse the signs because you're trying to flip the chart, right? But when it said reverse the signs, what it meant was instead of having Aries rising, you would put Libra rising. And that's what you have to do in the Southern Hemisphere.
Oh, my God.
I know. But when he said to me, reverse the signs, what I did was I reversed the way the signs were rising.
Well, that's what I would have thought too. Switched all of them. Oh no!
But have you ever done manual calculations?
No.
Well, there's an absolute pleasure awaiting you, and I'm going to say
if the grid ever goes down, God forbid.
Yes, if you can't, manual calculations, they used to take 5 hours to calculate a chart and you could still be wrong at the end because you added 2 when it should have been a 7 or something.
And this is why all the kings had an astrologer and most of the peasants did not.
Exactly. And that's why royalty's got their time because there's someone there making sure they know what time it is.
Yeah, for me it was my grandmother making sure she knew, noting exactly.
Yeah. But the real problem is that most of the books are written by Northern Hemisphere astrologers. The Southern Hemisphere astrologer I do like is Rod Susskind. He's from South Africa. And he's done quite a bit, but not so much these days. But you've got to... I don't want to say the Northern Hemisphere is where it's at because you will still get Southern Hemisphere people coming to you from Australia, New Zealand, and all those places wanting their chart doing. And if you could do it manually, well, you're going to really have to sharpen your pencil. So I hope that answers the question.
I mean, I think it does. I think it's basically what it boils down to is just ignore, and also it's symbolic. We're not talking about the actual harvest of the your garden. We're talking about the harvest in a metaphorical, soul evolutionary sort of sense.
Yes.
So Virgo is the harvest in the sense that you've reaped. What you've sown all summer and
Well, that's the image of her holding the sheaf of wheat, right?
Wheat, yeah.
But it's symbolic, right? That we have
the modern interpretation. It's like a stack of books or something. But.
Yes, and we've got bread, and therefore we will live.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
The devil's in the details. Yes, that's Virgo. Yeah.
Interesting.
Okay.
Thank you, JD.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So next question, you had a. Okay, so the next question comes from Sagittarius, just Sagittarius. How do I compensate for the lack of an element? For instance, no fire signs. And do you have any planets in any fire houses? Would be the secondary question to that.
Okay.
And I can so relate to this because I only have one planet in a fire sign, and it's Neptune. So,
okay.
Yeah.
So the question is, she hasn't got planets in one of the elements.
Yeah.
Or the people she's dealing the charts for don't have...
Right.
This is what we call a void, right?
Yeah.
So say, for instance, you don't have fire or you don't have earth.
Yeah.
It can also be on the modes where you don't have cardinal, fixed, or mutable.
Sure.
And technically it can also be on the polarities as well.
Yeah, less likely, but
yes,
possible.
Less likely, but it does happen.
Yeah.
So what we're saying is that, say, for instance, you've got no... Fire. And this is... Therefore, what we do know is that all the planets must then be in earth, air, or water.
Yeah.
And astrologically, if you're doing a reading for somebody, I always believe that you need to lean into your strengths.
Yeah.
Because you can build a strength such as earth, air, or water way easier than shoring up a void, because there's nothing there to shore up.
That's absolutely true. It's a great point.
So rather than saying to your client, "Oh, you've got no fire, you've got no inspiration, you're lacking, you've got something missing in you, Missy,"
right?
Which is not a good thing to say to anybody.
Hell no.
You are far better off saying you are super strong in air, you're highly intellectual, you're well read, you've got a lot of ideas, this and that. Lean into your strengths rather than try and shore up a weakness, because you really can't. You can never shore up a void as well as you can lean into a strength.
And that's what they even say, like in the corporate world, in that the strengths finder or whatever. Like, oh yeah. I mean, there's this huge test that you take in certain corporations where you find it's like there's 26 different ones, and you take this huge long quiz and you find what your strengths are, and it's like your top 10 strengths, and it's things like flexibility, initiative, team building, blah blah blah, whatever. Yeah. And then you have your bottom 5. But you don't focus on the bottom. You focus on what you can actually bring to the team.
Exactly.
Versus you don't want to spend all of your time trying to focus on what you are lacking.
Exactly.
Like I'm not an
extrovert about it.
Or that's a bad example because it probably sounds like I'm an extrovert on the podcast. But I don't know what is it. I'm not entrepreneurial, but yet I team with people who are entrepreneurial like yourself, and then I can be an amazing second in command, and then it just looks like I know how to be successful because I've latched onto the right, very outgoing and enterprising people. And that's something that I have a lot of mutable signs in my chart.
Yes.
So mutable planets, whatever. And that's one thing that you could focus on then would be, well, how do you partner with people who have initiative if you lack? And it's not even about lacking fire. It's like if that person says, oh, I don't have any fire signs, what they really are saying is, I feel like I'm lacking initiative. They're not looking at their chart and going, oh, there's a mathematical abundance of something. They're saying it because they feel that represents something about themselves,
yes.
right?
Yes.
And as any reputable astrologer is not going to say, oh, you're lacking fire signs. But the person might come to it, just from a beginner standpoint and say, oh, I don't have any fire signs. What's that mean? They're saying that because they recognize that they don't have something that they feel they should have, which is all that represent. By fire.
It really is about, you've got to play the hand you're dealt.
Right.
So if you've got a hand and all you've got is diamonds, hearts and clubs, and you've got no spades, you cannot win a trick on spades if you're playing bridge, for instance.
You may have a flush in...
Yes, in hearts or diamonds.
Yes.
But there's no way you're going to win at spades, ever.
No, forget spades.
Never going to happen. Exactly.
Else. Yeah.
So the hand you were dealt is the chart you have. Mm-hmm. So if you are lacking in or have a void in an element or a mode, so be it, but lean into your strengths.
Yeah.
Now, when we talk about relationships, and here I'm talking about girl-boy stuff, if you are lacking in fire, you are then naturally attracted to guys who have fire.
Yeah, guys, girls, whatever. Who have
well,
fire.
Whatever.
Yeah, exactly. It's true. And
your guy does.
Oh,
fire.
Oh, yeah, mine. Yeah,
I
for sure.
know.
Yeah, he's fiery. Yeah.
Yes.
But he doesn't have very many things in fire either. He just has Mars and Leo, which is like an amazingly fire. I know, right? But it's funny how parallel our charts are, but he has a lot of water and a lot of earth, and then he's got that one fire like right up in the 10th house.
He's still got the fire. It's different when you have an absolute nothing in these elements.
Right.
So, and her second part of the question was...
do you have any planets in the fire houses?
Now
that's an interesting question, because that would be the first house, the...
Fifth house,
and the 9th house.
Yes. I never go there, because if you've got planets in the fire houses, they're going to be in a sign.
Yeah.
So that's really how their energy is going to be expressed. That is going to be the role they're going to play.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting point.
So I never, of course you can, but I never go and say, oh, well, she's got something in a fire house. It's not going to help if it's still in Earth.
And the way to think about that, for me, because I love metaphors.
Well, yes, go for it.
Is if you think about the houses, you think about the type of... It's literally like the room in a house, or so the planets are the actors.
Yes.
The signs are the role they're playing, and the house is like the show they're on. So if you have nothing in fire, maybe you have no Tony Soprano in your chart, right? It doesn't matter how much you have in the 8th house. If the 8th house is ruled by Pisces, you're not going to be a Tony Soprano.
Exactly. Exactly. I don't even go there. I don't even consider fire houses because irrelevant. You want to know the planets, Jupiter's in Taurus, therefore.
Yeah.
And where the energy is, the planets are where the energy is, and that's what you need to focus on.
Yeah.
So if you do have signs with nothing in it, or elements with nothing, or modes with nothing in it, so be it. But it would mean then that you've got a strength elsewhere, and that's where you have to go.
For sure. And if it's fire, I mean, that's one of those things where people, I think there's certain things that are in our society, especially, like kind of more of a stigma, like, oh, lacking fire means you're lacking initiative and drive. And, like that seems more of a stigma than lacking, like earth, because you know what I mean? Like, oh, you don't have earth. Well, fine. You're not grounded. You're not like boring, whatever. But lean into what you do have, which can attract some energies elsewhere that will complement what you do have. And
exactly.
You can find other people who will, support your initiatives, and you can team with those people, and you can put your energies towards interesting things.
Yes. So it takes you away from being a generalist to more becoming a specialist.
Yeah.
And I do have an article on the blog about the elements in the garden, which will actually, I could probably put a link to it.
That's great.
And it's just talking about how the elements actually respond to the birds we were talking about. But it's just an example.
Yeah.
And that if you do, it's like saying, oh, I'm only 5'2". I wish I was 6 foot tall. What can I do about it? There's nothing you can do about it. Or saying, oh, I've got blue eyes. I wanted to have brown eyes. I'm lacking brown eyes. Play the hand you're dealt. Know who you are. And this is it. Astrology, know yourself, and go with that.
I mean, you can bend over backwards and do all sorts of things to try to pretend you have that other thing. But there's beautiful things about what you do have.
Yes, exactly.
Play up the things you have.
This is really it. I believe play to your strengths. And certainly I would never say to a client, oh, you're lacking in fire.
No.
Because they go away thinking, oh, I'm less than. She said I'm not good enough. No. Nobody loves me. I'm going to eat worms. And you can't let that come through.
No.
Because that's not helping anybody.
No.
Yeah.
100%.
So hopefully that gave some insight onto that question.
So. Absolutely.
Okay, Arwynne, what's up?
All right. Our next question comes from Judy. And she says, is there any kind of test I can do to determine what level I'm at? I know I'm beyond a beginner, but I'm not sure if I'm intermediate or advanced.
Wow.
Yeah. Huh.
That's a great question, because it's a self-awareness question of people who are learning astrology, which you get to a point you think, well, where am I in the pecking order?
Yeah.
So I'm going to direct you to I put the link below. There is a blog on my post talking about what type of astrologer are you, the 5 levels of astrologer. So the first level is the hobbyist.
Yeah.
Second level is the amateur. Then we have the student.
Yeah.
Then we have the professional, and then we have the master astrologer.
Wow.
And there's also some points about this. A quick overview is actually on my Instagram grid, but the article itself will spell out exactly what criteria you need to be to move from hobbyist to student. Is that good enough, or do you want me to go through all the points?
I just have to point out, this is one of those things where I read the question and I was like, wow, I don't know. That's amazing. That's a great question. And sure enough, it's one of those where you got like not only an answer, but you're like, here's a link. Here's the exact
criteria.
Here's exactly the criteria.
Shall we go through it?
Why not?
Why not?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just on the actual page that I'm talking about. I'll put the link below, and we're just going to go through the criteria that you need for each of these 5 levels. So I'm just going to, and funnily enough, Arwynne, you're sitting right here so we can see where you fit in all this, because who knows?
Great. Because as a Virgo and all that stuff, I just immediately think, well, I'm just a student. That's because I'm not a professional. I don't charge for my services, and I'm definitely not a master.
Well, let's see where you fit in.
That's my prediction.
Okay. We will see. Okay, so level 1 is a hobbyist astrologer.
Right.
So the criteria for this are, you read your horoscope every week. Check.
Yep.
You know your own and your family members' sun signs.
Oh, yes.
You can discuss astrology at a dinner party. Hell yes.
If they let me.
And you know enough to be dangerous.
Hell yes. Hell yes.
So those are your 4 criteria for a hobbyist astrologer. That really is the entry astrologer. Yeah. Level 2 is a student astrologer. So a student astrologer includes everything we've just said for hobbyist, as well as you have attended an astrology lecture.
Yes.
Check. You own 5 astrology books, including an ephemeris.
Like 50 something. Yeah.
You subscribe to the Mountain Astrologer or one of the trade periodicals.
Oh, I used to. Yeah.
Yeah.
All the newsletters count, though, right?
I think so. You have taken at least one astrology lesson.
Hell yes.
You are considering attending a conference.
I have actually presented at a couple of conferences.
Okay, so we're getting there. Yeah. And I'm saying you own Astro Gold, because where do you get your charts calculated?
Okay.
This is the tough part.
Yeah. It's so sensitive. And I'm going to say it one more time, because Janice, are you listening? I have a Mac now, and I love Janice. It's my favorite program, and it is not available for Mac. I will say it one more time.
Okay.
Janice, please make a Mac version.
Okay.
I will pay you.
All right.
Yeah.
So, and then we get to level 3, which is an amateur astrologer, and it includes everything we've mentioned already, as well as you can read the glyphs in a chart.
Oh, yeah.
You know the signs, planets, houses, and aspects. You own 10 astrology books, including a table of houses. You have at least one planet-specific book.
Oh, yes.
You are a member of your local group.
Oh, hell yeah.
You have taken formal astrology education course.
Yeah, actually, yeah.
Okay. You can interpret charts for family and friends.
Oh, yes. I don't always tell them, though. Just do it for myself.
That's fair enough. You can debate house systems.
Oh, God, yes. I try not to, but I can.
But you can. You realize there's something to be debated. That's the point.
Yeah.
You have attended an astrology conference.
Yes.
You own the latest version of Solar Fire, because it is the premium astrology calculation.
This is your bias coming out.
Is it? Well, what else have you got?
I think you know the answer.
Okay, and you know at least 4 forecasting techniques.
Yeah. I know of them.
Okay.
Now we're into a gray area.
Well, we're splitting hairs now. Good old Virgo.
Yes.
And you are invited to speak locally, which I know is true for you.
Yeah.
So that's the amateur astrologer criteria.
Right, well,
so I think you're 90%
solidly
there.
an amateur, yeah.
Okay, so but you never know. So let's look on. So level 4 is professional astrologer. All the above plus this.
Okay.
This is where we separate the men from the boys.
Yes.
You can construct a chart from scratch without a computer.
No.
Okay. You can calculate forecasts from scratch without a computer.
Definitely not.
You have an extensive astrology library with duplicate editions.
Yes.
You subscribe to all the trade periodicals.
I mean, how many are there?
Well, it's the Astrologer's Journal, Del Horoscope back in the day, and the Mountain Astrology and stuff like that.
Well,
You are a member of the International Astrology Associations. So we're talking ESAR and AFAN and whatnot.
No.
And CGR. You accept payments for your work. Okay. So here's
I
the
accept bribes and barter. Yeah.
here it comes. So your income surpasses $12,000 a year from astrology.
Interesting. Not even close.
Okay. You are invited to speak internationally.
Ooh.
Okay. How about this one? You have appeared on TV, radio, or a podcast.
Yes.
Go you. You write a column blog.
I have.
Although you do, I don't think it's on astrology, but you're halfway there.
No, I have in the past, though.
Oh, have you? Okay, well, who knew?
I worked for Planet Waves.
There you go, back in the day.
Yeah.
You own your self-hosted astrology website.
I have in the past. Yes.
You have published an astrology book.
No.
Okay. So what are we saying? You got half of those?
I mean, I've got like a third of those.
A third of those. Okay, that's the professional
quarter.
level. Okay, a quarter. Yeah, okay. But this is what separates it out.
I'm professional curious. Is that
Yes. But these are the things that once you've achieved those things, that's the point.
Amazing. What's a master?
So level 5, master astrologer. Here we go.
Here we go.
All the above, including you have been a professional astrologer accepting payments for at least 10 years.
All right.
You are considered a guru in the astrological community.
Wait, 1 second. Let's flip this around and have you answer the master questions, because I know that you said yes to all the professional ones. Let's see how many of the master ones
This is the
you
point.
answer.
This is just the point.
Yeah.
So yes to the first one,
All right.
and I wouldn't say I'm considered a guru in the astrological community.
It's kind of subjective.
Well, these are people like Stephen Forrest and whatnot.
I was thinking Stephen Forrest, yeah.
You have written more than one book. Well, that's true.
More than 40?
Oh, yes, but astrologically, I think there's only 3.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Your income exceeds $60,000 a year from astrology. Now and then, yes, not always, because I don't really consider myself a master astrologer. Your name is known by the general public. Not quite. Not like the horoscope writers, you see. You are the keynote speaker. Not yet happened, but I have spoken.
Nice.
Mind you, I did in Calgary. I opened it there, but still, it's not really.
Yeah.
You are a recipient of astrological awards acknowledging your contribution to the art. Wow. No.
God, do they have like an
They
Oscar?
do. Wow. You have forsaken daily consultations for focused astrology research.
Oh.
No, I still do daily consultations. Wow. Well, not every day. I do consultations weekly, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And you are the astrology of the day. No. So because of my criteria here, I am fitting in the professional astrology category. I'm not master astrologer. These are the real, the luminaries, the astro-raties.
The one who we call like the
Saint Stephen. Yes. And Nick Campion and those guys.
Liz Green.
Exactly. Those guys who are Linda Goodman, they are the masters. Yeah. I don't consider myself there. I consider myself...
ascended master? Ascended?
Oh, well, maybe.
Okay.
So these are your five criteria. Yeah. And if you're an aspiring astrologer starting out, where did you say you thought you were going to be?
I thought student, but I'm definitely solidly amateur with like a hint of professional.
Oh, well, there you go. Yeah. So these are the criteria. And I don't know how you feel about these criteria. And what would you say? I mean, they're pretty solid.
First of all, that's amazing that you have that entire, that's crazy.
Yeah. I've been doing this a while, you see.
Right? No kidding. I mean, I think these days, gosh, I mean, I subscribed to Mountain Astrologer magazine for so many years.
Yes.
And I was such a, like a proud subscriber. And then
do you remember they acknowledged our previous podcast? We were mentioned.
Did.
I know.
It was amazing. And I unsubscribed for financial reasons, like 10 years ago.
Okay.
And they do have a website. Everyone has a website these days. It was more just because, it was more just for technological reasons. I mean, I would love to support their continued existence, but I mean, who honestly subscribes to like any magazine these days, like a physical magazine? I love the era of magazines. I used to want to be a magazine editor. I thought that was like the most wonderful job you could have because like who doesn't love a magazine? But it's just,
so are you questioning that you should be subscribed to a magazine, saying rather you should be subscribed to a newsletter or a blog from you?
Yeah, okay, maybe the criteria should be: do you pay to support any kind of do you subscribe to a website or
the Starzologer
newsletter? Starzologer, exactly. That could be a different thing.
Yes. Well, maybe we can.
Yeah.
Note the Virgo, folks. We're splitting hairs here.
You asked, I answered.
Yes. So all of those aspiring astrologers who we know who do listen, you can certainly. I mean, I went through that quickly. You can certainly go through to the link. I'll put the link into the blog. Yeah. But go through that and see where you are, and actually, then you can see what you really do need to achieve. There's so much to it you might most people are past hobbyists when you get to listening to this podcast.
For sure.
But where are you? How much have you invested of your time, money, and energy into astrology? And that's the criteria.
Absolutely.
There.
And there are so many ways to come at it these days too.
Yes.
Like books, podcasts, apps,
newsletters,
the software. I mean, there's an amazing, level of software suites that you can pay a lot of money for.
Yes.
I personally am always trying to find, this is, whatever, like the scarcity mentality of my childhood, maybe speaking, and you always try to find a workaround of like, do I need to pay $100 a month for such and such? Well, maybe I can just get away with not. There are ways at any level, financially or knowledge-wise, to find that kind of information. And
That's right. But, there you have it. There are many things that go into making up a master astrologer, and there are multiple steps along the way.
Yeah.
And really, you've either done them or you haven't, really. So, So interesting.
Great question.
It's a great question. Thank you so much for the question. My other answer, I do have a secondary answer. I know. I do have a secondary answer to that. And if we haven't got time to go through our 5 levels, I do, I'm going to put a link to the website. I do have a crossword on my blog. Now, I know you've answered it, but it's a crossword. It's an astrology crossword, and it's one I send to people who say to me they don't know whether to take the beginner or the intermediate thing. So I send them a crossword and say, if you can answer this all in one go, then you're intermediate. Oh. But if you don't know the answers, you're still a beginner. And that
is it a crossword that you don't give them the answers? Like you don't give them the words they're looking for, or
I don't give the answers. It's a great crossword to cross them down.
Yeah, crossword. Got it. Yeah.
You did it. I don't know if you remember a few years ago.
Oh, yeah.
And, if you don't know what right ascension is, you're not going to know what the coding is. So these are just things that you either can just answer all the questions in the crossword, or you're thinking, what the hell's that question? And that tells us that
That was a couple of years ago. Did I answer them all correctly?
Yes, you did, because your name's on my list.
There you go.
So I'll put a link to this crossword, because Arwynne's actually, you must have passed this, 10 years ago? There's only 5 people on the list who've actually come back and said, hey, Alison, I did your crossword.
Amazing.
I know.
High score.
I know, so maybe by now anyone else can come back and send, because the answers are not there. You have to print the thing out and send me your answers.
Right.
But the point being, it's really a self-test. If you can just answer the whole crossword, then you're doing great.
Yeah.
But if you're thinking, what the heck is she asking?
Yes.
There are many things you still have to fill in, many gaps. So that's my second option.
Awesome. I love it. Love it. So our next question comes from Mr. Pisces. I love that name. And Mr. Pisces says, if I have Mars opposing my sun at the same time as Neptune is trining my sun, I'm assuming by transit, how do you know which is more emphasized? Maybe he means in his natal chart. Either way. Do you look at both or only one aspect? And that is an interesting question.
That is an interesting question. I'm going to take it that he was talking about by transit because, say, you've got, what was it, Mars opposing the sun?
Mars opposing the sun at the same time Neptune is trining the sun.
Yes. So you've got 2 influences coming into your sun, which is yourself and who you are and this and that.
Yeah.
Now, from my viewpoint, I would definitely go with the Mars opposition because you want to use your hard aspects first. They are the aspects, the squares and the oppositions. They're manifesting. Yeah. They make things happen.
Yes.
A trine from Neptune is just going to add some kind of frill to the bottom.
Yeah, especially trines. Trines are they're kind of the weakest of the aspects, unfortunately, because they're lovely. But they're the ones that can go on and you won't even notice.
Exactly. It's just a nice to have. It's just you feeling your sunshine in your step. Yeah. But the Mars opposition sun, you're going to feel that. And that really has to be the one that you talk about first.
Yeah. So also Mars is closer. So that's always
that's true. That's true. So any aspect that's a square or an opposition, you need to look into those from transits because they are going to make changes happen.
Yeah.
That's what manifesting means.
Yeah.
Something's going to happen.
Yeah.
And with it being an opposition, it's going to be something from the outside that makes a change, a Martian influence from the outside. And if it was a square, it would be an internal change that was going on, but something will change or give.
For sure.
Whereas a trine from Neptune or any other planet will just be a nice to have hanger on. And I never look at transiting trines and sextiles because nobody comes to an astrologer when they're having a trine from Neptune. Yeah. They come when they're having an opposition from Mars.
That's true. And the only thing I might say about that is that if they're happening at the same time, the Neptune might sort of ameliorate the effects. You know, it might make it kind of easier, but at the same time, it's not by transit, it's not a thing.
It's not, no.
If we're talking about natally, that's another story. Yes. And then you'd want to look at the closeness of the orbs.
Yep.
What sign they're in. And
are they applying or separating?
Exactly.
Which sign's the sun in, which planet's dominant. But Neptune will not be that planet.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, exactly.
So I would say go with your conjunctions first, always.
Yep.
Transiting conjunctions, then go to the oppositions and squares. And honestly, I don't really go further than that.
For the transits, no, not at all.
You know, there's so much going on. You really do need to focus on what's happening and where the action is. And that's going to be from these tension-driven aspects. Yeah. So that would be my answer to that one.
Great answer. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Paul asks, what aspects, planets, or house combinations reveal predisposition to clairsenses, clairvoyance, psychic phenomenon, sensitivity to, I don't know, ghosts, whatever.
Ghosts coming in.
Exactly. And this person says, clearly they know a bit about astrology. They're saying, I assume that something to do with Neptune, the moon, maybe quintiles. What have you seen in your practice that maybe has corresponded with people who say they have these senses, these sixth senses.
Yeah, so it's definitely a Neptune thing. You're getting
sure.
you're getting the vibe coming through. And if you've got Neptune in the 12th house, go right there, because you're going to get messages through your dreams.
There you go.
But if Neptune is aspecting Mercury, where message is coming from, this is likely to come through. So say you've got Neptune conjoined Mercury, you are likely to get messages from the other side, and that's clairaudience, or you're hearing voices, that again would be Mercury, or you're just getting this whole theme, this psychic business, right?
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it's Pisces in general. I would say it's definitely a prominent Neptune, where it is engaged enough that you can communicate it clearly. So it has to be in some way connected to Mercury.
Yeah.
So we've all got Neptune somewhere in our chart,
Yeah.
but they're not all going to be tuned into messages from elsewhere.
Yeah.
Or even... so I would first look to see which house Neptune is in, to see where you are likely to, in which arena you're likely to get these messages from.
Is it in the 12th house, 8th house?
And if it's like, say it's in the 5th house, you are likely to just get these feelings about your kids or something like that.
Or creative influences, like inspiration, like striking you like lightning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And because Neptune has to do with the unseen, the unheard, the elusive.
Yeah.
And if you can, and we all have one, as I say, we all sometimes get that feeling about something or other.
Yeah.
But if you've got it connected firmly with your Mercury, you're more likely to be able to get the message into your head, so that you can then verbalize what it is you're saying. So if you're a psychic or a crystal ball reader, this is a classic example of a Neptune, a prominent Neptune would be for that type of thing.
Yeah.
Whereas psychic stuff in general is more Plutonian.
Yeah.
And of course astrology is Uranus. So Neptune really is the crystal ball reading and that sort of thing, I would say.
Yeah, interesting.
Was that the question? Did that answer?
I think so, for sure. And here's a little, I digress. Elizabeth Gilbert, who wrote Eat, Pray, Love, she had an amazing TED Talk. You can just Google Elizabeth Gilbert TED Talk, and she wrote about inspiration and how inspiration strikes, and how you have to listen, because inspiration is
fleeting.
Yes, it's fleeting. And sometimes she talked about you're driving down the street and all of a sudden, you're on the highway, but inspiration strikes and it wants to tell you a story. And you're like, no, I'm driving, leave me alone. But sometimes you just have to pull over and write it down, because you can't ignore it. And inspiration is something that needs to be nurtured and accepted. And you have to have a relationship with this she calls it the daemon of inspiration, and it's almost like the spirit that just enters you. And a lot of people who are very creative, especially poets and writers and songwriters, will talk about this inspiration just striking them and taking over them, almost like being possessed. And that's a fascinating correspondence to this, I think, that might be, I don't know, helpful or just interesting. I love to hear from, creative people who have a weird, beautiful way of describing how creativity works.
I mean, see, Neptune as well has to do with your spirituality. Yeah. So if you are someone who, I don't know, prays or invites God in or whatever it is, or some divine being, or call it what you will, it is through that planet that we are tapping into these unseen forces, these unseen energies that are guiding us or inspiring us in some way.
Totally. Yeah.
So, I would say that.
Yeah, look to Neptune.
Okay.
Yeah. Excellent answer. And our last question. This is from Troy. And Troy asks, what considerations do you take when interpreting a queer person's birth chart? And this is an aspiring astrologer asking us this. So it's not only from the perspective of someone who is in the LGBT community, but also someone who is interpreting charts for people in that community, and wondering, are there any astrological markers, or more so, what do you do when someone comes to you with questions about that, and how do you answer them in an astrological fashion?
Well, this is an interesting question. It's very much a question of today as well.
For sure.
So I'll tell you a story. Probably 20 years ago, when I first started out, well, even longer, with astrology, there was one woman who was exploring charts of gay men.
Yeah.
And she, back then, even now, Uranus would be this planet, the planet of the the rebel, the one going against the grain, the one that is standing separate from the crowd, the one that is different, the one that doesn't fit in. And although it could, of course, refer to many different types of people, it was very much a focus back then of the gay community, the Uranus, strongly position Uranus, first house, 10th house, or something like that.
I remember reading a lot of things about, because I have Venus conjunct Uranus in my chart.
Okay.
And I think if anyone has listened to my podcast with Katya recently, she was like, oh, does that indicate polyamory? And I'm like, well, I'm not going to answer for myself, but it indicates an openness to exploring different things. And of course, in back in the day, as astrologers would have said, well, it's a subculture, it's an alternative lifestyle.
Yes.
And these days we talk about it a little differently.
We do. You see, that's the thing.
That's the thing.
So the conversation has shifted.
Yeah, exactly.
So you may get people in your consulting room who are from a variety of backgrounds or a variety of, what's the word I'm looking for?
Preferences or identities.
Yes,
or
identities.
Yeah.
And so I don't think Uranus is going to cover that anymore. I think we've moved on, that this is something that was always there, but it's only now become more mainstream.
Yeah. And I think the thing, I mean, the first part of this is just, I don't consult. I'm not a consulting astrologer, but I would think if someone's coming to you, they're not going to immediately say, I'm a gay man or woman. No. I'm a trans man or woman. They're going to come to you with their chart and say, can you help me?
Yes.
What is my job prospects? What is my relationship prospects?
It's the same.
And you're going to, it's the same interpretation.
Yes.
And if they do ask about that, if they do say, I'm not out to my parents, I'm attracted to women, I'm attracted to men, this is what's happening, then you can look to their chart and say, well, what do the symbols tell me? What am I seeing that explains this? And how can I help this person to assimilate this into their personality and who they know themselves to be? Mm-hmm. But it's not like you would ever be able to look at the chart and see, oh, this person is never. And that's never been the case. That's
the thing. It's not. It's like you can't look at a chart and say, "Oh, here's a mass murderer."
No,
because the guy born on the same day with the exact same chart is not a mass murderer.
Right. Exactly.
So you can't pick these things out.
No, but you can help someone understand themselves better by seeing those symbols and knowing a bit about them. If they answer you when you're talking to them in a consultation,
exactly.
And you can say, "Well, Mars is afflicted here." You've got Mars opposite Saturn. Maybe there's issues with the father. Maybe there's some. Whatever, right?
Yeah. If we go back to the biology of it, the biology of astrology, no matter who you are or how or which way you're leaning, if we go back to the thing is, there's two planets with Mars and Venus. So if you have ovaries, Venus is going to be the planet that's going to have something to say, and if you have testicles, Mars is going to be the planet. And if there's a blending or a combination within that. For whatever reason, or you're on hormones or something, that's going to be the shift there. But these are your basic biological representations through the planets of this.
And the amazing thing about astrology too is that it's all about archetypes. I mean, Mercury is the OG, like, bisexual or non-binary of the zodiac.
Yes, the asexual being.
Yes. Exactly. And mythologically speaking, Venus is about femininity, but everyone has Venus. Yes. Mars is about masculinity and drive and Aries. But everyone has Mars somewhere. So we are all...
Exactly. We all have it in us.
This might be my own bias talking, but everyone is a little bit everything.
Yes.
And it's all a spectrum, and it's been a spectrum ever since time immemorial. This is not a new thing. Astrology is all about archetypes. Yeah. And so if you are an incredibly Venusian person, that will be very evident in your chart, whether you're, RuPaul or... or Brigitte Bardot,
Greeks, right?
Exactly, and you'll be able to see like the predominance of certain archetypal energies, whether you're born female or male, or you feel you were born in the wrong body, or you're attracted to men or women or both or whatever. And the interpretation is going to be about the symbols and about the archetypes, and not about biology.
This is it. And also, if you look at it the two ways again, if we look at Venus, this is love. Who you love, what you love, and why you're loving them.
And who you attract, and how you attract them.
So that's Venus, whereas Mars is the the chase.
Yes.
Are you going to get off the couch and go and chase down that person because you're finding them attractive?
Right.
And that's the difference. Can you go and club them and drag them back to the cave? That's Mars.
Right.
And so no matter who you are attracted to, the attraction will come through the Venus, and the actual what are you going to do about it will come through the nature of the Mars. So
absolutely.
I do think we have to keep an open mind on this.
For sure. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Arwynne, so one thing about these questions we've had recently, I do think is that as an astrologer, your own chart attracts the type of people that you can help.
That's super interesting. Yeah, I totally have found that to be true.
So if you are dealing with
LGBT or neurodivergent or any of these questions who, that have come up to us recently, people who they're like, can you see autism or clairvoyance, or can you see if someone is gay or trans or whatever from their chart? I mean, you can help
I mean,
people.
the short answer is no, really.
No, the short answer is no. You can't look at their chart and see those things. And thank God you can't, because do you want that? Like, then the government will be interested.
Yes,
Then they'll be like, astrology? Like, that's not such bullshit,
Yes. But the chart, if you're an aspiring astrologer, your own chart will attract the type of people that will keep coming back to you.
Yes.
Who are honestly, it's like almost the same person keeps coming to you with that question.
And you can use that as a superpower. That is your superpower.
Yes.
If you have any of these things in your life, that is maybe your focus. That is...
Yes, you're attracting them to yourself through your own chart.
100%.
Whereas, to be honest, it doesn't really come my way. I get a lot of... what do I say? Women over 60 basically coming my way. Second Saturn return type things, and what am I going to do now type of thing.
Yeah.
But but that's the nature of my chart, and you of course have different charts as well that
For sure.
different people come and ask you questions. So the nature of your very own chart will show the type of clients you're likely to get, and the type of people who are likely to come and say, "Hey, could you look at my chart?" Because
it's true, and it's not only just because you are projecting your own identity. It's because there's some weird thing about astrology, and I think I've said this before, but any sensitive points in your chart, like the degree of your ascendant or whatever, I have found that to be a tractor beam. I have found that I have 2 degrees of Scorpio on my ascendant, and you would be amazed at how many times that's come up in my life. 2 degrees Scorpio Sun, 2 degrees Scorpio ascendant. My partner has 2 degrees Scorpio Sun. And we've been together 26 years, and his sun is conjunct my ascendant, like to the minute almost. Like we're like 4 minutes apart, which is ridiculous. But I've met people who I've had an instantaneous connection with, and then later done their chart and found that they have 2 degrees Scorpio somewhere, like either ascendant or sun or Mercury, and I've been like, oh, that makes sense. That's why we met and we're like talking for 4 hours nonstop,
Yes.
And it this is just a long-winded way of saying you will attract people who you can help, who you can communicate with. And that's one of the most amazing things about astrology, which is intangible and we can't explain it and we can't like lay it out as a path, but it's true and it works.
Yeah.
So
it's so true. Any connection, especially your ascendant, sun and moon, people will be attracted to that. If they don't have a connection to your chart, they won't even speak to you.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
So you're living through your chart, and really I think it has to be to do with self-understanding, that you're going to attract people who you can help, who are going to connect with your chart in some way or have a conjunction to one of your planets, and that's how you can help. I had a spate of people coming to me who all had their birthday on September the 26th. Different years, but it was because their sun was exactly sextiling my sun, and they said, I saw you, Alison, I thought you're the astrologer for me. And that's how it happens. Whereas some signs I never see, ever.
And we talked about this, we don't want to stigmatize anyone,
no.
But it's literally because, like, I don't know anyone who is, let's just say, a Capricorn, for example. I mean,
you said it. Yeah. I never get Capricorn clients. Never.
Maybe because they're skeptics. I don't know. But Aries, same thing. All you skeptics out there.
This is it.
Yeah.
But people are attracted to your chart and they need to make a connection with you to think, oh, I feel comfortable enough. I've got a connection with this person. They've got a planet, clearly they don't know that's connecting with one of mine. They will understand me. Let me speak to them.
That's true. And a funny, just a surface way of telling what, like in real life, anyone who's listening to this, beginner, like amateur, whatever, on Facebook, everyone whose birthdays cluster around a certain time, if you're getting like a huge spate of birthday notifications in 1 month and then there's like a drought, those are the people who are attracted to you.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? It's like, oh my God, August is like just ping, 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 ping every day.
Exactly.
It's because they're seeing something in your chart. You attract.
You can't help everybody.
No, exactly.
You're not interested in everybody. You know,
why would you be?
Exactly. In a room of 10 people, one, you maybe want to talk to them. The others, you're not interested.
Yeah.
This is why we sit on the bus and we don't talk to the guy that's sitting next to us.
Yeah.
We've got nothing in common.
Yeah.
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 So I think you really do have to understand your own chart and say, okay, this is who I am. This is who is coming my way. And you can look back on the last 3 charts you've done and say, oh yeah, it's this sort of person.
Right.
These are my people.
And that's a really interesting thing to bring up too, because the same person who had mentioned that had said, I'm seeing a commonality between some charts that I'm looking at, and I don't know if it's real or if it's just because I'm looking for it. And that's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the big question we all ask ourselves, even astrologers who have been doing it for decades. Like, is it just confirmation bias? Well, it doesn't matter if it's confirmation bias. Freudian slip, I almost said conversation bias. But that's the thing, right? Because it's all about talking. It's all about relating. It's all about helping people. So it doesn't matter. Like, we know it's real. We know there's something to it. We know there's something valuable in it. And we know that this works. It works. That's the important thing. It doesn't matter why it works, you know?
Yeah, this is it. This is why my clients are not your clients or the next guy's clients, because they're connecting with my chart, whereas your people are connecting with your chart.
Yeah, or else we would all be going to Stephen Forrest or whatever, you know?
Yes, exactly. So know who you are. I think that really has to be the first thing.
First, and then you can help others.
You can say, oh, here's another one, and you see they keep coming. Yeah. And over my years, they keep coming. It's the same person keeps coming, really, basically.
Yeah.
But that's fine. This is who I can help. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, folks. So we have been celebrating our 100th episode with some Q&A, your Qs, our As, and hopefully we've made some inroads into some of your questions here. If you do have further questions, you can email us at starzology@gmail.com, and certainly please do visit our website at starzology.com. Also, if you're not yet on our mailing list to get the Starzologer newsletter, which goes out every Sunday, please go to the website and sign up for that, because I do my best to provide you with interesting astrology as well.
Yes, and in this particular one, you'll be able to hear about how we met, which is lovely.
Exactly. That will be the latest one. And and if you want to follow on with what Arwynne's doing in her life, you can catch her at MsPink.net, that's MsPink.net, and she's exploring different things that's going on.
Books and movies and podcasts and...
stuff that interests her.
Yes. Maybe interests you, who knows?
Well, I'm sure it will. And also, if you just want to send us a quick question, you can text us. If you go to the show notes on the podcast, at the very top it says, send your astro questions to Starzology. You click that text, send the question through, and we will be able to get to it when we get to our next Q&A, which will be at 125 episodes. Arwynne, can you believe it?
I can believe it. I do. I believe it.
Okay, so to celebrate our 100th episode, we're actually going to be going out for dinner. That will be tomorrow night. We're going to take some photos. I'll be able to put those on the blog post as well.
Amazing.
We are thrilled to be here, both Arwynne and I. I can't believe we got this far. There just seemed to be so much work, so much technology to wrangle, and there still is.
It was just meant to be. I can believe it. I believe it.
Yeah. And here we are, and we thank you for being with us, because we couldn't have done it without you, and we look forward to the next 100 episodes.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Well, Arwynne, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Thanks so much for getting this far through the episode. I just want to take a moment to tell you about the 2 main options of my astrology services. So the first one is coaching. If you are an aspiring astrologer, and by that I mean someone who's perhaps a hobbyist astrologer, or someone who's learning astrology, or a student, or you've got a few books and you've been doing it for a while, but perhaps you need a little bit of help to bring it all together, then maybe getting some astrological coaching from me would be the answer for you. The astrology coaching I offer is a 1-hour session on Zoom, and it's tailored to answer your particular questions. For example, if you have issues with natal chart readings, we can go there. Or if you're having problems working with your forecasting, we can go there. Or even basic astrology stuff, or even getting yourself organized for your astrology business. The idea is that astrological coaching will answer your particular questions. It's tailored specifically to you and where you are in your astrological journey. And I'm happy to help you out with some guidance about how you can get going, what to focus on, and what to dismiss. So that would be the astrological coaching for people trying to learn astrology. The second astrological service I offer is consultations. So this is for someone who perhaps doesn't know anything about astrology, but they just want to have their chart read or get their chart done. Call it what you will. So once more, this is a 1-hour consultation over Zoom. I will interpret your chart, tell you about the main features, tell you about where the energy is flowing, and all the rest of what is entailed in a thorough natal chart interpretation. I can also add in some forecasting in there too, bearing in mind we only have 1 hour. So just in summary, I've got coaching for people who want to learn astrology, and I've got consultations for those who want to get an astrology reading done. I'm Alison Price from Starzology.com. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next time.